All right, welcome back everyone to our water fluoridation investigation. Today is Thursday, April the 2nd, 2026, and it's the first day of using my brand new microphone. So hopefully the sound quality will be better than it's been in the past. Today, I want to focus in on two things really. The state law in Virginia that requires pure water, and this fluoride regulation that has been called into question. So, I want to focus on the historic Virginia law that requires pure water. So let me show you what it is that we're going to go over, and we're going to tackle it one at a time. And then I want you to let me know if you think that this fluoride regulation is actually lawful. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, guys, I've broken this up in three sections for you. First, we're going to tackle the historic laws. Okay, 1950, we have the water law. And then we're going to move into 1951, where VDH created a policy regarding fluoride. 1951, Virginia legislators draft a bill to legalize water fluoridation. This bill never passed, so it never got turned into a law. This is very important. Then we're going to move into the fluoride regulation that's in question. The big question that we have is, was this regulation lawful? Is this regulation lawful? We're going to look at the law for proposed regulations in order, meaning the law that describes how you have to have a public hearing before you cast a vote. Okay. And then we're going to move into 1973. VDH board voted to require water fluoridation. Again, did this vote violate state law because they voted before having a public hearing? Did it violate the state law that requires pure water? And then we're going to move into the third section and look at a recent FOIA responses. We're going to look at a FOIA response from VDH, where VDH claims that they never required a locality to add fluoride to the water. Specifically, we're going to look at a FOIA that involves Henrico County, Virginia. Then we're going to move into a Freedom of Information Act request that I received back yesterday from the Riviana Water and Sewer Authority. And they say that this water authority does not maintain records that specifically identify or compile the state statutory authority relied upon to add fluoride to the public drinking water. So we've got a lot to tackle today. So let's go out of this really quickly. Okay, guys, before we get started on everything, I want to remind you that the Virginia Department of Health derives its authority from two separate places. So, one, they have primacy under the EPA, and two, they have the authority to carry out the wishes of the Virginia General Assembly. So, if you remember from past videos, we have the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, and they essentially put EPA in charge of enforcing the national primary drinking water regulations. And then EPA, because they cannot be everywhere, they gave primacy to state health departments, VDH being one of them. So VDH has the legal authority to carry out the national primary drinking water regulations. Okay, so VDH can be strict as those regulations, or if they choose to, they can be even stricter. Okay, now what the Virginia Department of Health cannot do under their primacy, when they're wearing their little primacy hat, is they cannot require water fluoridation. Why? Because the EPA is forbidden from requiring water fluoridation. So VDH, as the primacy agency, is also forbidden from requiring water fluoridation. So the only other place that VDH could wind up requiring water fluoridation is if the Virginia General Assembly passed a law that said, okay, we're going to have, we want fluoride to be in the drinking water, and Virginia Department of Health, we want you to make regulations regarding the fluoride. Okay, so remember, you have the primacy under the EPA, and then we also have the Virginia General Assembly. So primacy is out, and now we're just going to look at what laws are we working with in Virginia, because that is the only way that Virginia Department of Health can make regulations regarding water fluoridation. Now, VDH, they cannot make laws, okay? So how it works in Virginia is you have a state law, and the Virginia General Assembly, they will pass, they will make laws, and they'll have a bill, and the bill gets turned into a law, and essentially the law will say that the board, meaning the Virginia Department of Health board, shall make regulations regarding X, Y, and Z. Okay, so VDH, they cannot just willy-nilly make regulations. They are only allowed to make regulations that the legislators have decided. Okay, so as long there has to be a law that says that VDH can make certain regulations. Like, VDH cannot make a regulation that says we're going to put lithium in the drinking water. Why? Because there is no law that granted VDH the authority to make regulations regarding the addition of lithium to be put into the drinking water. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. They always remember that VDH derives its authority from two places. They've got their little primacy hat, and then they have their hat that they wear where they're following the orders of the Virginia General Assembly. So with that being said, let's get into this, okay? It's going to be exciting. I can't wait for it. Here we go. Okay, everyone, we're going to start off in 1950. This is the water law. 62-47, Supervision by State Board of Health. The State Board of Health shall have general supervision and control over all water supplies and waterworks in the state insofar as the sanitary and physical quality of waters furnished may affect the public health or comfort. And this law goes back as far as 1919, according to this 1950 code. If you went and dug up the 1919 code, it may go back even further. But so essentially it's supervision by State Board of Health, and so the state can supervise the water to make sure that the water is sanitary, right? Fantastic. Now we have 62-48, examination of water supplies. So now the State Board of Health can examine the water. It says such board may cause examination of such water supplies to be made to ascertain the purity and fitness for drinking or domestic use or the liability to impair the public health. So the State Board of Health has the right to examine the water to make sure that the water is pure, that the water is safe to drink. That is it. That is all they can do. They cannot, according to this law, the Virginia Department of Health cannot regulate water fluoridation. They cannot make regulations regarding water fluoridation, not by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, but yet, as we move into 1951, Virginia Department of Health created a policy regarding fluoride. Now, why would they do a policy as opposed to a regulation? Well, what was happening in the time, 1950, is folks were gearing up to put fluoride into the drinking water. And there was no law in Virginia that authorized any localities to put fluoride in the drinking water. But they decided they're going to go ahead and they're going to do what they're going to do. Who cares about that pesky law? Who cares about that pesky Constitution? So in order to, kind of pretend like this is being done on the up and up, Virginia Department of Health came up with a policy to pretend like it has the backing of law. It does not. Policies are not laws, okay? Policies do not supersede laws. Policies do not supersede the Constitution. So it says here, statement of policy for fluoridation. It says the State Board of Health approves and encourages the fluoridation of public water supplies for the partial control of tooth decay upon assurance that there is compliance with specific conditions. These are to be made in writing to the State Department of Health. Now, notice how they say here that the State Board of Health approves and encourages, right? They use this language because they do not have the lawful authority to regulate fluoride. But what they're going to do is they're going to create a policy in order to help localities illegally put fluoride in the drinking water. Because back then, when the health department picked up their pom-poms and started cheering medical tyranny and drugs in the drinking water, then everyone, kind of fell for it. I say everyone, that's actually not the case. There was a lot of politicians that felt like this was illegal. There was judges in Virginia that said this is unconstitutional. They ruled that it was unconstitutional in the lower courts. So there actually was a big fight behind this. I believe that this policy was done in order to manipulate the public, right? And to pretending like that this actually means something. It does not. Policy is not law. I cannot stress this enough. Let's look a little bit closer at this policy that kind of makes it appear like water fluoridation is official and lawful. So number one, endorsed by the local medical and dental groups concerned. What? Endorsed by local medical and dental groups concerned? Why would they do this? Well, it's because fluoride is a drug as defined by the FDA. Now, the FDA refuses to regulate fluoride as a drug, but it is an FDA defined drug, which is why they wrote a policy that says that the local medical and dental groups need to endorse this. If it's not a drug, why does the medical community need to endorse this? If it's not a drug, why do doctors need to endorse this, right? The answer is because it is, in fact, an FDA-defined drug, despite the FDA being derelict in their duties and refusing to regulate said drug. Okay? So let's move on to number two. approval by local health officials. Again, this is to alter your health. Okay, they want to drug you from cradle to grave. So the health department, they feel like as long as the local health department, puts on a cute outfit and grabs some pom poms, then that's okay. It's okay to put drugs in the drinking water. Number 3, evidence of public demand as shown by ordinances or resolutions by local governing bodies. Now, the way it works in Virginia, I believe that if there was a law that authorized water fluoridation, you would have to have an ordinance. I don't think a resolution would be sufficient as far as I can tell, but I didn't spend a tremendous amount of time looking into that because it's kind of moot. Okay. Number 4, an application by the individual, firm, institution, organization, or municipal corporation involved for a written permit and obtaining same before beginning fluoridation. So what this means is they're saying that if like the city of Richmond applies for a permit to put fluoride in the drinking water, and the health department says, okay, fantastic, go ahead, then that's good enough. Number 5, it says development of plans, specifications, operations, procedures, and methods of supervision in conformity with requirements to be determined for each individual installation by the state Department of Health. Okay, again, this is a policy. Water fluoridation was not legal in 1951, which is why they are coming up with nonsensical policies as opposed to regulations. Okay, they're helping localities illegally put drugs into the drinking water. Now, let's move on to 1951. Virginia legislators draft a bill to legalize water fluoridation. Now, this bill never got turned into a law. Let's take a close look at this. Now, first thing I want to point out is, why do we need to have a law that authorizes cities and the health department to make regulations if it was already legal, right? They're making policies, so that would make one think that water fluoridation was already legal. But the fact of the matter is that I believe that the health department got over their skis. I think they created this policy anticipating that this law would pass, and then they could turn that policy into a lawful regulation. The problem is, guys, that this bill never got turned into a law. Okay, they did not have the legal authority to do it, which is why they needed a law to make their illegal acts magically lawful. So let's take a look at this proposed bill that never got turned into a law. This is going to be Senate Bill number 106, offered January 21st, 1952. And it says, a bill to authorize cities having water supplies to fluoridate the water and to provide for regulations in connection therewith. Now, notice there's two things going on. The bill would have authorized cities to put fluoride in the drinking water, and the bill would have authorized the health department to make regulations in connection therewith. Okay, you need to have two parts to this. You have to have the first part where the General Assembly says, yes, Henrico, you can put fluoride in the drinking water. Yes, City of Richmond, you can put fluoride in the drinking water, right? You authorize localities to put fluoride in the drinking water. 2, you authorize Virginia Department of Health to make regulations regarding water fluoridation, okay? That's very important. You need to have both parts. I've seen this time and time again. You have to have both parts. So let's look a little bit closer. And it says, starting on line 10, be it enacted by the General Assembly of Virginia. Each city of this Commonwealth which maintains and operates a water supply system may chemically treat the water therein, so as to dissolve in such water fluorine to a concentration as established by regulations adopted by the State Board of Health. The State Board of, we're now at line 15, we have the State Board of Health is directed to prescribe by regulations adopted and promulgated by in the manner in which fluoridation of water shall be accomplished in accordance with provisions of this first part hereof, and the concentration which shall be obtained by such fluoridation process. Copy of such regulation shall be sent to the Director of Public Works or other appropriate officials of each city in this Commonwealth, and no fluoridation water system shall be approved by the Department of Health unless it complies with the regulations established by the State Board of Health. So again, you need two parts. Each city of this Commonwealth which maintains and operates a water supply may chemically treat the water therein. Okay? Did they do this? No. There was no law prior to this, and this law did not pass. So all the localities that was putting fluoride in the drinking water in 1951 would have been doing so illegally, right? There's no law that authorizes you to put fluoride in the drinking water. There's no law that authorizes Virginia Department of Health to promulgate regulations. I cannot stress this enough, okay? So this law never passed, okay? So remember, they needed this law to pass because the current law on the books in 1950 says that the board can regulate water to make sure that it's sanitary. The board can make regulations as long as the water is pure. These laws, these two laws that I just mentioned here in 1950, they never authorized VDH to make regulations regarding fluoride. These two laws never authorized any locality in Virginia to put fluoride in the drinking water. Okay? They could not do it under the law in 1950. Okay, so this proposed bill, that never passed and it never got turned into a law. Now, let's fast forward to 1953. Okay? Was there a law that magically allowed the Virginia Department of Health to make regulations regarding fluoride? The answer is no. There was no law that, and there currently is no law that authorizes Virginia Department of Health to make regulations regarding fluoride, right? This law never passed in 1952, and there's never been anything since then. So what the heck is the health department doing passing a vote to require water fluoridation? I would say what they're doing is being corrupt. But that's just in my opinion. Okay, so let's look at this. This is 1973, VDH votes to require water fluoridation. The vote allegedly violates state law. It violates state law for two reasons. One, it violates a state law that limits what VDH can do, and they're limited to only requiring pure water. And it violates another law because when you take a vote for regulations, you have to give public comment beforehand. So we're going to jump into that after we go over to this section. So the vote allegedly violates state law because they were supposed to have a public hearing prior to the vote. Now, why didn't they have a public hearing prior to the vote? how many laws have they broken at this point? A lot. They likely decided not to. They likely decided to allegedly break the law in 1973 because they knew they didn't have the authority to make this regulation to begin with. That is what I believe based on my research. So this is all my opinion. Okay, guys. So now we're going to look at Virginia Department of Health meeting minutes. This is going to be page 127, and this is 1973. We've looked at this before, but we're going to look at it again so then you can really see what's going on here. So it says, Mr. Adams reported that his staff was drawing up proposed rules and regulations for public water supplies, which he felt were necessary because of the rapidly expanded number of supplies in the state and probable action by Congress in passing the Pure Drinking Water Law. What they're discussing is the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act when they say the Pure Drinking Water Law. It now appears that a federal act will be approved by July 1st, 1973, which will include primary drinking water standards for medical reasons and secondary standards for aesthetic reasons. The law will provide for state enforcement, and the state must adopt regulations which are equally as stringent as the federal regulations. It is possible that the federal funds will be appropriated. Mr. Adams stated that the proposed rules and regulations were nearing final draft stage and were being reviewed by the Attorney General's office in the hope that they could be presented to the Board of Health in September. Okay, so this is important. Essentially what happened is you have the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act that comes on the scene, and they're going to limit the amount of contaminations that's allowed to be in the drinking water. Now, this is coming from the federal government. So in response to this order, Mr. Adams writes up waterworks regulations to be in compliance. The Virginia Department of Health Board doesn't need to vote on these waterworks regulations because they're required to do it according to the law, right? They have to do it according to the law. So what they then go on to say that the next paragraph, and this is when things get dicey, says on a motion made by Dr. Haggerty. He's a longtime dentist. He is BFFs with the Attorney General. He's part of the Republican Party. So he's got a lot of, support behind him. A motion made by dentist Dr. Haggerty, seconded by Dr. Hutchinson. The board instructed Mr. Adams to include in the regulations a requirement that fluoride be introduced into the public water supply at approval level, if not otherwise available in the natural supply. This being a method for the control of dental disease accepted by all national dental organizations. What? What are they doing? Why are they passing a vote? Why are they saying yes and voting to require water fluoridation? Was there some sort of law that allowed them to make this regulation? No. Remember that 1952 bill never got passed. There is nothing that magically made this lawful. There is no law that allows the Virginia Department of Health the authority to make this regulation in 1973. So why are they doing this? Why are they behaving in a very evil way? Well, likely what happened, if I were to guess, is that they decided that they're going to sneak in this regulation regarding fluoride. They're going to sneak it in to all the other waterworks regulations, and people will be none the wiser. right? So when localities have to get this waterworks regulation, you have this thick book, and it's people hand it and say, okay, now this is coming from the feds. The feds want us to, make sure that the water's safe to drink. Localities in Virginia would have thought that this fluoride regulation came from the feds. That's why they did this, in my opinion. I cannot see this any other way. That's based on my research and having conversations with people. VDH knew that they could not require water fluoridation. They knew they had no law that authorized them to require water fluoridation. So what did they do? They snuck it in with all these other regulations that were being written up to be in compliance with the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. This is a very, very, very evil thing that they did, in my opinion, allegedly. Okay, so let's move on. I mean, you saw for yourself, there's no law that authorizes them. Where's that law? Okay, so here's where it gets even worse. Not only is there no law that authorizes the Virginia Department of Health to promulgate regulations, right? We know what a law would look like that authorized them to do it, right? Says the State Board of Health is directed to prescribe by regulations adopted and promulgated by in the manner in which fluoridation of water shall be accomplished. We know what the law would look like. There is no law, okay? So it gets even worse, okay? So not only is there no law that authorizes them to put fluoride in the drinking water, they were required, Virginia Department of Health was required to put a notice in the newspaper about any proposed regulations, right? So if anyone's ever been to a city council meeting or a board of supervisors meeting, the board will start, for example, the Henrico board, they will, want to, let's just say, build a new park somewhere. So they'll start having conversations about building a park, right? And they'll meet with developers, and they get pretty close to, deciding that they're going to do this. But before they take a vote, they must allow for public comment. They must allow the public to speak on the matter. People can speak in support of the park. People can speak in opposition of the park. Recently, there was a data center that people were trying to put up in Eastern Henrico. The public came out and was very much against it. Said, please do not approve this data center. Then the board, they put it on the agenda, they allowed public comment, and then after public comment was done, the board said, okay, we're not gonna vote yes on this. The public, is very against this, and we're gonna honor the public's wishes. Okay, so you must do that prior to taking a vote. Now, you just saw over here in 1973, these meeting minutes, they already voted yes. They voted already. So that's a problem. They did not give public comment. How come they didn't give public comment? Could it be because they already knew this was illegal? That's what I think has happened. Okay, so this is going to be on September 23rd, 1973. I found this in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and it's going to be on page 11 of the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Again, September 23rd, 1973. So this was the legal notice of public hearing on public water supplies. Commonwealth of Virginia, State Board of Health. So they're putting this notice in the paper because of all of the waterworks regulations. They could have been stricter than the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, okay? So people could give public comment and say, I'd like to be stricter on mercury. I want to have a stricter level when it comes to lead, arsenic, cadmium, whatever. Okay. So it says, pursuant to authority vested in the State Board of Health by Title 62.1, Chapter 4, and Section 62.1-46, and we'll look at this further down. This is the Pure Water Law. And in accordance with the Title 9, Chapter 1.1 Code of Virginia, as amended in 1950. Notice is hereby given of a public hearing by the State Board of Health to be held on October 11th, 1973 at 11 a.m. in the main floor auditorium, James Madison Building, 109 Governor Street, Richmond, Virginia. Okay, so again, the first few codes that they're referencing has to do with the water, okay, pure water, and then the second one that they're referencing has to do with the law that requires the board, it requires the board to put a notice in the newspaper. Okay, so we're going to go over both of those after this. So what was the regulation? We're going to be looking for regulations regarding fluoride. Okay, so let's look. Let's see. Let's zoom into this. Really look. It says the regulations set forth general provisions for obtaining and revoking permits to construct and operate waterworks. Permits. Nothing about fluoride. Establishes general criteria for the operation of waterworks. Nothing about fluoride. Establishes criteria for bacteriological and chemical quality for pure water. Nothing about fluoride. They're talking about removing contaminations to make the water safe to drink. They are not talking about fluoride, which is a FDA defined drug. They say that it's going to be regulation sets forth procedures for elimination and control of cross connections, establishes the general design and construction requirements for waterworks, thereto establishes general requirements for pumping facilities, storage facilities, and the distribution system. Wait a minute. Nothing about fluoride regulations. Now, why would they violate the state law and not post a fluoride regulation? Post that they're going to vote on a fluoride regulation. Oh, that's right, because they already voted to make it a regulation. And why did they do this in secret? Because they couldn't get their way back in 1952. They never got a law passed that authorizes cities to put fluoride in the drinking water. They never got a law passed that authorizes the health department to make regulations in connection therewith. They never got their way. So they saw this as prime time to sneak it in. Nobody's gonna know. I promise you, nobody's gonna know. They said, wait a minute, don't we need to put a notice in the newspaper? No, forget that notice. We've already broken the first law. Let's go ahead and break the second law. Allegedly, in my opinion. All right, let's move on. So it says, this discusses how copies of the proposed rules and regulations are available for examination by the public during regular office hours at the Bureau of Sanitary and Engineering, Virginia Department of Health, 109 Governor Street, Richmond, Virginia. Copy is on file with the Division of Sanitary Research and Drafting, State Capitol Building, Richmond, Virginia. Copy will also be available for examination during office hours at each of the following places. And they put it at Abingdon. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Lexington and Norfolk. Abingdon. Never heard of that, actually. Okay, so let's move on. I wanted to show you, so this is 1973. So remember, they cited in that newspaper article why they have the legal authority to make regulations. So remember, they didn't discuss any regulation regarding fluoride. They cited a state law. Does the state law allow for VDH to regulate water fluoridation? No. The answer is no. Before we look at those two laws, let's take a look at the definition of pure water. And it says, pure water, water fit for human consumption and use which is sanitary and normally free of minerals, organic substances, and toxic agents in excess of reasonable amounts for domestic usage in the area served and normally adequate in supply for the minimum health requirements of the person served. And they go on to say in 62.1-46, supervision by State Board of Health. So the Board of Health can supervise. The Board of Health shall have general supervision and control over all water supplies and water works in the state insofar as the sanitary and physical quality of waters furnished for drinking or domestic purposes may affect the public health and may require that all water supplies be pure. Okay, they're discussing that you remove contaminations from the drinking water to make the water safe to drink. Okay, nowhere in here does it say that the board shall have supervision over putting drugs into the drinking water and mass medicating the public with a well-established neurotoxin. This is a well-established poison at this time. Remember, this has been traditionally used, fluoride has been traditionally used to kill rats and to kill bugs. Okay, so they know this is a problem. It's been traditionally been used to slow down your thyroid. It's also been used as types of antipsychotic medications. Okay, so they know this affects the brain and the nervous system. They go on to say in 62.1-47, rules and regulations of State Board of Health. The board may adopt rules and regulations governing waterworks, water supplies, and pure water, subject to the provisions of Chapter 1.1, 9-6.1 et seq of Title 9 of the Code of Virginia. Such rules and regulations shall be designed to protect the public health and guarantee a supply of pure water in relation to such matters, except by the purpose stated. Said rules and regulations shall not apply to structural design, location, and construction of waterworks established by counties or under authorities created by counties unless requested by resolution of the governing bodies thereof. Now, the reason why I wanted to show you this 1973 law, this is pretty much how it's worded now, if not exactly the same how it's worded now. I don't actually have that for you, but you can look it up for yourself to see if it's word for word the same. The reason why I wanted to point this out for you is these laws, this is what was on the books in 1973. The reason why I wanted to point that out is because that is when this regulation, that's when they voted to require water fluoridation. How could they possibly make a regulation regarding water fluoridation in 1973? Is that why they hid it from the newspaper? Because they did not actually possess the lawful authority to make the regulation? There's no law that allows localities to put it in the drinking water. You can't You can't skip that process, right? Okay, so I want to show you together here's the 1950 law, and then we have 1973. So you can look at them side by side if you wish. Let's move on. So I have a problem with the fact that they did not actually notify the public in the newspaper about this fluoride stuff, right? So the law back then essentially said that if you're going to make a regulation, you have to give the public an opportunity to show up and speak. They can speak for it or against it. So here I want to show you that the definition of rule means any regulation, okay? And then I want to show you right here, this comes from the Code of Virginia of 1964. I couldn't find what was on the books in 1973, the exact same time. So this is the closest I could get, was 1974. So it says, publication and filing of proposed rules. No rule shall hereafter be promulgated by any agency unless and until the express terms or an informative summary of the proposed rule has been published by and at the expense of the agency at least once in at least one newspaper of a general circulation published to Richmond, Virginia, or if the rule has only local application, we're not going to go on with that. So essentially, what they're saying is that you need to publish these rules in the newspaper before you take a vote, right? And when they say rules, they mean regulation. Okay, that's why I showed you. Rules is actually the same as regulation here. So you have to publish the proposed regulation in the newspaper prior to taking the vote. Did they do that? No. If you recall up here, and I'll show you again, they first took a vote and passed. They took a vote and said yes to this fluoride regulation, and then they never even put anything in the newspaper. They put, information about the waterworks regulations, nothing about water fluoridation, but they would have had to put a notice in the paper prior to making a vote regarding water fluoridation. They did not do this. From my research, in my opinion, I have not been able to find it. I've tracked the timeline. I've tracked everything. There's no law that authorizes them to make this regulation, and I have been unable to locate anything where they gave a notice prior to taking this vote, right? I do not see this whatsoever. And this is in like a board meeting. This isn't even at where you have public meetings where you would have taken a vote. So I just cannot imagine, not by any stretch of the imagination. It would have been at this meeting in September. Well, actually, the meeting was in October, so it would have been on October 11th. So they voted on this without a law that allowed them to do so. They voted on water fluoridation without first giving the public an opportunity to support or to reject the regulation. This is a big problem, guys. This would make the regulation void on multiple levels. Okay, also I want to show you here, we've got 9-6.6. Public hearings on proposed rules, it says adoption and amendment. A public hearing shall be held by the agency at the time and place named in the notice required by 9-6.4, and opportunity shall be afforded all interested persons to be heard and to submit objections, amendments, evidence, and arguments. The rule may be adopted in the form in which it was filed or as amended in the hearing, provided the amendments do not alter the main purpose of the rule. So, public hearing on proposed rules. Well, as you saw, they already took a vote and they didn't notify people in the newspaper. And there's no state law that allows them to do this. Okay? This is a big problem. Let's see. Petition for, we're not worried about that. Okay, so we're almost to the home stretch. We now have the recent FOIA responses. So I went back and forth with VDH for a couple weeks, and finally VDH says this communication is in response to your request for any and all regulations reflecting that the Virginia Department of Health actually required Henrico County, Virginia, to fluoridate its community drinking water at any time in the past, from 2000 to present. Now, Henrico County, they swear up and down, left and right, everybody from the waterworks operators all the way up to the Board of Supervisors, that VDH forced the county of Henrico to put fluoride in the drinking water. Okay, so I did a records request to VDH, and VDH says that the Virginia Department of Health, has found no records or emails responsive to your request. In other words, Virginia Department of Health says they do not possess any records showing that the health department forced the county of Henrico to put fluoride in the drinking water. Now, I find this to be interesting because why did VDH pass this allegedly unlawful regulation that says may require water fluoridation in 1973 if they didn't actually exercise that authority? They claim they've never forced any locality to put fluoride in their drinking water, not ever. That's what they're claiming. But when I've spoken to a variety of localities, they say, yeah, VDH forced us to put fluoride in the drinking water. They said that we cannot get a waterworks permit unless we put fluoride in the drinking water. They said, we're going to be punished if you do not continue to put fluoride in the drinking water. So you see both sides. The localities say VDH required water fluoridation, and VDH says that they did not, and in particular, VDH says they have no records showing that they did actually, in fact, require the county of Henrico to put fluoride in the drinking water. I find that to be astounding because it shows how dysfunctional things are. Why do so many localities believe that they were forced to put it in the drinking water if VDH wasn't actually forcing it? Why are so many localities confused about how the regulations work regarding fluoride? Why are they so confused? Huh? So many, at least a dozen localities in Virginia that I've spoken to say VDH is forcing us to do this. We don't want fluoride in the drinking water, but they're forcing us. Okay, it's slimy. It's slimy. Perhaps the reason why they use slippery language to trick the localities into putting fluoride in the drinking water is because they knew that regulation does not have the proper statutory backing. But that's just in my opinion, okay? All right, let's look at the last FOIA response here, and this is going to be from Riviana Water and Sewer Authority, and it says, "Good evening. Riviana Water and Sewer Authority acknowledges receipt of your request. Riviana Water Sewer Authority does not maintain records that specifically identify or compile the state statutory authority relied upon to add fluoride to the public drinking water. Accordingly, no responsive records exist. The statutory and regulatory authority for fluoridation is found in the Code of Virginia and Virginia Administrative Code, which are public records not created or held exclusively by Riviana Water and Sewer Authority. Now, this is cute. Okay, so they're like, this is the main part that you want to focus in on, the highlighted part. This water authority says they don't have any records that they've relied upon to add fluoride, to lawfully add fluoride to the drinking water. They have no records. They're putting fluoride in the drinking water, but they don't have any records that they've relied upon to do this. Meaning they don't have any records that show any statutory authority. Nothing. They've got nothing. But they kind of want to say, but we promise you that we're doing it legal. You just need to go look on the Code of Virginia. It's there. No, I don't think so. You need to, if you're putting fluoride in the drinking water, you would lawfully, you would have a record that has the statutory authority. You would have it, but you don't. Okay? In my opinion, allegedly. So there we have it, folks. VDH is, they're slippery little devils, huh? And let's go out of this now. Okay, well, there we have it. We've gone through the history of the state law regarding water, the state law regarding pure water, and the fluoridation regulation that I believe to be utterly unlawful. I think that the reason why the board never notified the public in the newspaper is because they knew they didn't have the statutory backing. I think the reason why they voted without the public noting is because they didn't have the statutory backing. And I believe that what they did was illegal. I do. There is no state law that authorizes any locality in Virginia to put fluoride in the drinking water. There's no state law that authorizes Virginia Department of Health to make regulations regarding water fluoridation. I showed you the law, the proposed bill. So that's, if there was a law, that's what it would look like. We know how a law should look regarding water fluoridation in the state of Virginia. Okay. So I think this puts the Virginia Department of Health in a predicament, and I think it puts the localities in a precarious predicament, because Virginia Department of Health's position is like, well, right now the regulation says recommends, right? I think that they moved from that may require language to recommends in 2021 because they could see, where this was going. And so right now they say, well, it says recommends. And if we have all of these localities that are putting fluoride in the drinking water without a law that authorizes it, like, that's their problem. We can't help it if they're breaking the law, right? But they can, because VDH is the ones that actively targeted these waterworks and got them to put fluoride into the drinking water. That's on record time and time again. It's on record for 2018 in Spotsylvania County. The health department came out and said, we really, really, really want you to put fluoride in the drinking water. They are playing an active role, and they continue to play an active role. So, anyhow, that's all I have for you today. I hope that this video was helpful, so people can really get it stuck in their heads, what's going on, and that there is no law that authorizes water fluoridation in Virginia. Just because the health department made a policy doesn't that's not the equivalent of law. That was a bad policy. Okay, you can't just follow a policy. There needs to be law, right? And I think the health department knew that if they write policies and they recommend stuff, then people will they'll just follow along. They'll just do it like little lemmings. Nobody stops to think. People just think, well, if the health department is blessing this act, then it must be okay, that it must be lawful. And that is simply not the truth. Our health departments should not be trusted. I've been to these meetings. These people are not equipped to be passing regulations regarding health. They told me themselves. Many of them said, I'm not recommending water fluoridation. And they took offense to the fact that I said, well, this regulation says you're recommending it. They said, yeah, but I'm not. Just because the regulation says it doesn't mean that I am. I've yet to meet a board member that says that they're recommending this, that they support this. It just doesn't happen. I've asked the board, if the board members, about the adverse health effects, and they had no idea fluoride even causes dental fluorosis. Okay, I asked the board members, a federal judge has now determined this poses an unreasonable risk of injury. So what are y'all doing? Why are y'all still getting behind this? And each one said, I'm not recommending this. It's not me. So I haven't met anyone who was familiar with the health effects of water fluoridation, the negative health effects of water fluoridation. This is very, very reckless. Very, very reckless. The fact that people who are clueless have the power to make regulations regarding our health is quite terrifying. These board members, they have too much power, right? Which is why we have laws to limit what they can and cannot do, right? And one of the things that we've limited the board from doing is making regulations regarding water fluoridation. There is no state law that allows the board to make regulations regarding water fluoridation. And remember, you need two parts to it. It's not just enough that you have a law that allows the board to make regulations. You also must have a law that allows the localities to put the fluoride in the drinking water. There are two parts to this. Two, right? We don't have either component of that. And actually, not only would you have to have a law that authorizes water fluoridation, and that law would have to authorize Virginia Department of Health to make regulations, you would then the locality would have to pass an ordinance on top of that, right? And in the case of Henrico, there is no ordinance, there's no statutory backing. I've done FOIA requests, and they admit that they don't have any documents for the purpose or justification. They are doing this in secret. This is a scandal. Okay, guys? An absolute scandal. And you should all be outraged about these people affecting your health and your children's health. This is absolutely outrageous. But anyway, that is all I have to say about that. Remember, if you want to support this channel, make sure that you give a thumbs up and that you share this video, and you leave a comment below. So I will see you guys next time, and you could leave a comment below if you want me to cover a particular topic. Some of you have expressed interest in the history of water fluoridation, more of that. And there's a dentist that I've been in contact with who has given me some really good information and has written up some really good information. And I thought that would be good to cover. So anyway, let me know what you think. It is on my list. So yeah, that's it. And it is hot. It's been about 80 some degrees in my house, and not quite used to that. So time to cool off, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.